All right, welcome to another edition of our football showcase. Cory Geiger, Jason Dambach. We're going to switch it up a little bit this week. We're going to start with the Steelers because my question for you, JD, is Ben Roethlisberger in his inevitable demise. We've seen the lack of arm strength. We've seen the dinking and dunking, which can work. Dinking and dunking can work. But we've seen this offense really struggle, no running game. And now we're wondering what the future of Ben Roethlisberger is. Can he, at 38 years old, get back to being a great quarterback that can lead this team to a Super Bowl?
You know what, Cory? It was only 4 weeks ago that the Steelers' offense looked pretty good. They were throwing the ball a lot, and Ben looked pretty good. So I find it really hard to believe that he's hit this cliff all of a sudden in the last 4 weeks, especially when you can point to a number of things that have gone against the Steelers, not the least of which, of course, has been kind of that compacted, disjointed schedule, number one. Number two, no running game whatsoever. It's a combination of the run blocking is poor. The running backs aren't good enough anymore. And, you know, the big question is that everybody really wants to know is, are the Steelers throwing the ball 50 times a game and doing it in the short variety because they're protecting Ben or because they're protecting their offensive line that can't run block? That's the big question. No, Ben hasn't looked great. The arm strength doesn't look like it's there, but you know, I'm not quite ready to go there yet. I'm not going to sit here and say that the end is here for Ben Roethlisberger. I want to see how this plays out over the next few weeks. Let's see what they look like against a bad Cincinnati team.
Right.
Hopefully they can get it back together on Monday night, because after that, you know, you've got Indianapolis, you've got Cleveland, and then you've got the playoffs. So this is the week to fix it. Let's readdress this next week.
I'm glad you mentioned the Bengals, because if they were playing almost anybody else this week, I might be leaning more toward that he's done type of mentality. But we get a free pass week. We get a week this week against a bad opponent where he can go out. There won't be an enormous amount of pressure, and he can maybe – confidence maybe isn't the right word for a 38-year-old Hall of Famer, but you know, maybe he can go out and get some rhythm. The receivers can get in rhythm. Remember, these receivers have dropped 33 passes. No other quarterback in the league has had more dropped passes that he's thrown. So, but I would say if they were playing the Colts and the Browns starting this week, then I might be leaning more toward that he is about to fall off a cliff, because that's really what happens, JD. It's not like guys go from here and then it's just like a slow – that's not really the way it works, of course. A lot of times it truly is bonk, and, I mean, that's just the way the position, the nature in that league, how difficult it is, even for good quarterbacks or great quarterbacks. If you start to struggle a little bit, you can fall off in a hurry.
Well, and that's what happened to Peyton Manning, one of the all-time greats.
Man, he was awful. That was the worst.
The cliff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, he had some bad injuries too. You know, he had, and of course Ben, you know, with that elbow issue that he dealt with last year. Drew Brees, you're starting to see the same thing happen to him, and Brady's hung in there, but we all know that, you know, Brady's a guy that has taken care of himself. I think it's safe to say probably a bit better than most quarterbacks, incling a guy like Ben. So again, I'm not quite ready.
You think Brady's in better shape than Ben?
Imagine that. What a bold statement to make. Yeah. Again, you pointed out something very important. The Steelers, I don't know if they lead the league in drop passes, but it's certainly, they've got to be up there. And they've had some very high profile drops in key situations. And the fact that it seems like anytime they get 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, they can't get the 1 yard that they need. So I want to see them get the running game going. Maybe that's a lost cause at this point. They haven't been able to do it for 4 or 5 weeks, so there's no reason to believe that all of a sudden they're going to become the kind of team that's going to run the ball for 200 yards. We would settle for 100 yards collectively. But let's just kind of see what happens. I'm very curious. In my mind, Cory, I've waited, tried to hold off as long as I can until after the Cincinnati game to make a decision on where my mind is at about Ben Roethlisberger and his future.
Yeah, it's good that they've got the Bengals coming out. But I'll ask you this, because we're going to go on record here, and we don't know who they're going to play yet or what the scenario might be. Can the Steelers win one game in the playoffs? And when even ask that question when they were 11-0 a couple weeks ago seems just crazy. But with the issues, do you think that we were talking, could they get to the Super Bowl before? I think it's more legitimate to wonder if they can win one game.
Depends on the opponent. I mean, I think if it's a Miami, if it's Baltimore, a team they know very well, I think they've always matched up well against them. The one thing, even with the injuries on defense, the first half that the Steelers played against Buffalo on defense on Sunday night was spectacular. And you could just see the air go out of the balloon when that pick six took place. So I do think they do have the defense. It can still travel. Obviously, they need the offense to provide much more than they've given. So, yes, they can win a game. I don't think they can win two. They certainly can't get to the Super Bowl the way they're playing.
All right, let's go on to Penn State. Illinois this week in the Champions Week game. It was announced earlier today, Illinois' best receiver is going to skip the game. He's going to start preparing for the NFL draft. I truly wonder if Illinois can be prepared or inspired, motivated at all to play this game. Lovie Smith was fired over the weekend. It can go one of two ways. Sometimes kids will rally around each other and really go out and try to perform to their very best. I tend to think with Illinois, we're going to see the opposite, though, that we're going to see a team that's going to come in here and really maybe not put up much of a fight. What do you think we're going to see?
Yeah, I'll take it the other side and just look at Penn State and the momentum they have. I don't know that it matters who they're playing right now outside of Ohio State. The way they've rallied, the confidence that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 weeks, it's very exciting. It's very inspiring. In Illinois, clearly, they don't have Lovie Smith anymore. The head coaching changed this week. Probably got a lot of players wondering what's going to happen there, where the future is at. So certainly this is the right opponent to play this week. But I'm more looking at Penn State and finishing strong and the way they played. What a resilient season that they've had after the 0-5 start. I know you go back to middle October and you say Penn State would finish 4-5, and that would sound like the end of the world. And it was the end of the world 4 weeks ago. So just to see them come out and play well in this game and do what they've done the last few weeks, and to respond from the adversity they saw early in that Michigan State game, because it wasn't going very well in that game in the first half, to come back the way they did. Really excited to see Penn State one more time.
Why did Pitt opt out of a bowl game? JD is a Pitt fan, lifelong Pitt fan. Saw one of their assistant coaches tweeted that it might have been 90% of the players voted to not play in a bowl game. 6-5, and I'm asking this from a Penn State perspective. I'd like to have seen Penn State versus Pitt in an ACC Big Ten matchup. We could have seen that maybe in the Duke's Mayo Bowl or something like that. But why do you think Pitt, their players, just said, no, we don't want to do this?
I think if you look at a lot of the key players on the team, a lot of the upperclassmen have said they're going to go, to the NFL. Now, they did get some good news the other day that Kenny Pickett is going to come back for 2021. That was some very surprising news. But I just feel like, a lot of the senior players had already moved on. It sounded like the administration and Pat Narduzzi put the decision in the hands of the players. And I've got to guess, Cory, that if you put that decision in the hands of players at a lot of programs in the country that are 500 or just very barely above the 500 mark, that they're probably all going to make that decision, right? So I think that's really what it came down to. I think, honestly, it was probably good that they just moved on, get ready for the off season, go back, see your families. And I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. None of us have any clue or any perspective on what any of these programs across the country have had to go through just to get to Saturday. Yep. And this goes all the way back to June, really,
yep.
Including here at Penn State, where we thought they weren't even going to play for a period of time. So, it's just been a whirlwind. It's been very emotional. They've all been through a lot. And I don't have any problem with any program that doesn't want to go to a bowl game.
Well, you make an interesting point because, look, Penn State fans are probably going to be watching this, and Penn State's players do want to play. You made a good point about a lot of programs, the players in those programs might not want to play. I think the feeling here is because Penn State has won 3 in a row and maybe 4, that, yeah, they want to have a chance to get to 5-5 and finish on a 5-game winning streak. However, let's just say Penn State had been 3-1 and then goes to 3-4 and then finishes 4-5, whatever, 5-4. Would Penn State's players under that scenario be voting to play in a bowl game? Now we like to, Penn State's players, they just want to play. Well, everybody thinks their team's players just want to play. I think Penn State's players want to play because they've won 3 in a row, maybe 4 in a row, and it's a chance to really finish a bad season on a high note. What do you make of that scenario versus Pitt's season of just kind of, chugging along up and down, up and down, up and down?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I think it's an interesting way to look at it. Where I land on this is usually during bowl season, we're already done by now, right? The games are done by Thanksgiving weekend, unless you make it to the championship game, and then you play that first weekend in December. But most programs, all the players get to go home for a couple of weeks, and they come back to campus and get ready for the bowl game. This year is different. If you're going to play in a bowl game, you're staying, which means no time to go back home and see your family, no Christmas probably, if you're going to play in a bowl game. So this is a different year. Normally you have that opportunity to decompress, to unwind, to go home, see family and friends, and that's not the case this year. So it all depends on how it's framed. It all depends on how it's presented to the players in the program and what they're actually voting on, if that's the way the decisions are made. It's kind of funny, though, Cory, if you look at it, it seems like the northern schools are kind of letting their players make the decision. The southern schools will tell you.
Yeah, you're playing.
You're playing.
Well, you're a fan.
Do you like it or not?
You're a fan. And we do this as the media. You've got a lot of experience on both sides. Are you disappointed that Pitt's not playing in a bowl game?
Not really, because personally, I'm kind of overwatching them for the year. Just
what if it had been?
They got what they can out of the season. You saw enough. I don't know what more upside there really is. Let's just pack it in. As a fan, I was sort of relieved, to be honest.
I was just holding out for Pitt versus Penn State, and I know we got to see it the last 4 years, but I at least thought that could make a bowl game, whatever bowl game it is, would make that bowl game interesting.
It certainly would have been, or West Virginia, throw them in the mix. West Virginia, Penn State, West Virginia, Pitt, Penn State. Any of those three would have been really neat to see, I guess. If that would have been a possibility on the table, yeah, I would have looked forward to that. But just knowing that so many players in that program had NFL aspirations, it's a really good, junior, senior class at Pitt in terms of the NFL draft. It's not all that surprising that that's where it landed.
Narduzzi said he'd like to have Penn State come out to Heinz Field in 2025 since they can't play Virginia Tech. That is not happening. There is no way Penn State's going to give up a home game to go out and play a road game. Now, maybe if Pitt wants to come to Beaver Stadium, we'll see. But give me a year that we see Penn State play again.
I think before the COVID season, it didn't seem like it would happen until the late 20s or early 30s, whenever the openings started to happen. I'm just wondering now, Cory, I'm very curious to, even when you look at 2021, now most programs still have their schedules fairly set. I know Pitt, they have a game at Tennessee actually next year. They begin a home and home with Tennessee. They've got Wisconsin coming up. So, that's one thing that the Pitt program always does really well. They always have a premier Power 5 crossover home and home type game. But I just wonder if these games are going to hold up, particularly the ones that are scheduled for next year. And if that's the case, does that mean we have to get a little more geographically centered? And in that case, does that open up a possibility for Pitt and Penn State to slide in and play together? But if that doesn't happen, I do think that this will happen again. I do believe that as you get further and further along and further away from people in both administrations that have ties to the past and the animosity and the he said, she said kind of stuff, I've got to believe that people want this to happen.
Absolutely. People love talking about it. It's December 17th. Yesterday, Alan Saunders from our sister site, Pittsburgh Sports Now, he wrote the story about what Narduzzi said. Those stories just blow up. They're fun. We know that that's what fans want to talk about. All right, JD. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was in the stands for the last two Pitt Penn State games at Beaver Stadium. And I know a lot of Penn State fans like to say, it's the little brother. We don't care about Pitt. We'd rather, play Akron. Well, that's not what I observed.
Hey.
I observed a really heated, fun family versus family rivalry when you walk through that parking lot and in the stands, and that's what college football is all about.
I'll tell you what, Penn State had better never think about Pitt as little brother. Pitt could beat Penn State in any given year. I've said this 1,000 times. The money and the finances are the difference. Penn State has different needs financially than Pitt, because Penn State could, me, you, and 20 dudes at Walmart can go to Beaver Stadium and play Penn State, and they're going to get 100,000 fans and 3 million viewers on TV. That's the difference. But you mentioned that little brother part, boy. Just ask Mike Hart how big of a mistake it is to call somebody little brother, because Michigan State has whooped their tail ever since he said that. All right. JD, thanks for the time as always, man. Enjoy it. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thank you, Cory.